The Draki arrived in a fleet of shimmering ships, their sleek forms gliding effortlessly through Earth's atmosphere. To most on the planet, it was the moment humanity had been waiting for, the first encounter with an alien species. The world held its breath, hoping for peace, hoping for a future that would elevate humanity to the stars. And the Draki, despite their vast technological superiority, seemed to offer just that. Dr. Ethan Hayes, one of Earth's foremost diplomats, stood at the front of the welcoming committee. Tall and composed, with graying hair and a weathered face, he exuded the calm confidence of someone who had spent years negotiating with governments, corporations, and even hostile factions on Earth. But nothing could have prepared him for this. The Draki were an awe-inspiring sight, their bodies slender and almost translucent, with bioluminescent patterns pulsing across their skin, their faces serene and wise, their eyes glowing with a deep, knowing light. They were beautiful in an alien way, intelligent, peaceful, and seemingly omnipotent. In the months leading up to the arrival of the Draki, Earth's best scientists and strategists had worked tirelessly to prepare for this monumental event. Their knowledge of the Draki's culture, drawn from intercepted transmissions, showed a race that had long since abandoned war. The Draki had transcended conflict, channeling their energies into science, art, and cooperation. They had no need for military might, and they believed that other species would soon follow their example. Dr. Hayes had been chosen to lead the negotiations, in part because of his ability to empathize and to bridge gaps between seemingly incompatible groups. He was ideal for presenting Earth as a peaceful world ready for ascension. But as the Draki ship landed on the White House lawn, their leaders, an elegant trio known as the Triumvirate, remained oddly quiet. There was no sign of aggression, no weapons, only a serene, unspoken confidence that they were superior. They greeted the humans with what appeared to be a mix of curiosity and condescension. As Dr. Hayes stepped forward to make the first move, the Draki ambassador, known only as Nyrex, extended a delicate hand. "We come in peace," Nyrex said, his voice smooth like liquid metal, "to offer you enlightenment and knowledge." The crowd of onlookers erupted in applause, their excitement palpable. The Draki had not just come to visit. They had come to guide humanity to a new era. Yet even as Hayes shook Nyrex's hand, he couldn't shake a gnawing sense that something about this encounter wasn't as it seemed. The Draki's calm demeanor, their omniscient gaze, gave off an air of unspoken judgment, as if they already knew the answers to questions humanity hadn't yet asked. After the brief exchange, the Draki withdrew, allowing Dr. Hayes and his colleagues to lead them to a secure facility where they would begin their first official discussions. As they walked away, the Triumvirate shared a silent look, one that Dr. Hayes couldn't interpret. It felt as though they were seeing through humanity, measuring them, testing them in ways he couldn't understand. Still, he clung to hope. This was a moment of opportunity, an opportunity for peace and for humanity to rise to a new age. Little did he know, the real test was just beginning. The Draki had one fundamental flaw in their calculations. They had not accounted for humanity's untapped potential for survival and its ferocious battle skills. As the days following the Draki's arrival unfolded, Earth's leaders and the public were gripped by an intoxicating mix of awe and optimism. The Draki's technology was nothing short of miraculous. Cures for diseases, sustainable energy solutions, and even advanced farming techniques that could feed the world's starving populations. Governments around the globe eagerly embraced the idea of entering an intergalactic alliance, believing that these otherworldly visitors would be the key to unlocking humanity's full potential. Dr. Ethan Hayes had never seen the world so united. The tensions between nations seemed to vanish overnight as leaders agreed to put aside their differences for the greater good. But this collective excitement masked a deeper uncertainty that Hayes could not shake. The Draki were far more advanced than humanity in every way, but there was something in their eyes, a cold, calculating certainty that unsettled him. As he prepared for the next phase of the diplomatic exchange, He felt as though he were on the edge of something profound, yet potentially dangerous. It was a week after the initial meeting that the Udraki made their proposal. The triumvirate, in a formal gathering with Earth's top scientists and political figures, presented an offer, a cultural exchange, one that would include a demonstration of humanity's capabilities and potential. The Udraki would share their technological marvels, but in return, they wanted to test human skills in various fields: physical, intellectual, and strategic. It was framed as an opportunity for Earth to prove its worthiness to join the galactic community. This idea seemed reasonable to most, and the excitement of being chosen made it difficult for anyone to refuse. However, the Udraki made it clear that they would not be bringing their advanced weapons or military tactics to Earth's defense. The Udraki had no need for such things. They had long since left behind violence, war, and the notion of conquest. Their ambassadors emphasized this message in all their speeches. Peace was not just a goal, but the inevitable path forward for any civilization that hoped to ascend to the stars. Sarah Novak, the renowned military strategist who had earned respect for her work with the UN peacekeeping forces, was selected to lead the human contingent for the cultural exchange. A sharp mind and calm under pressure, Sarah's reputation had been built on years of mediating between warring factions, devising plans for de-escalation, and studying military history in ways that brought humanity's complex past to light. She was the perfect candidate, the Udraki believed, to show that humanity could coexist peacefully with them in the galactic fold. Yet, as Sarah stood before the assembled crowd to accept the offer, she sensed the Udraki's subtle condescension. Their praise was perfunctory, and their smiles held no warmth. Despite their stated ideals of peace, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the Udraki were measuring humanity not just for its knowledge or its worth, but for something more, something darker. "I look forward to seeing how humans respond to this challenge," Nyrex, the Udraki ambassador, said, his gaze lingering on Sarah. There was a strange, almost imperceptible shift in his tone, one that made her uneasy. The invitation was made, and the stage was set. The Udraki were ready to show Earth what true peace and enlightenment looked like. But Sarah, with her deep understanding of human nature, couldn't help but wonder if this test was truly about peace, or something far more calculating. This continuation expands the world building and gives more context to the Udraki's offer, setting up the cultural exchange as both an opportunity and a potential trap. Sarah Novak is positioned as a key figure, someone who understands the stakes and remains suspicious of the Udraki's true motives. It subtly heightens the tension as the story moves toward the inevitable conflict. The first few days of the cultural exchange went smoothly, almost too smoothly. The Udraki's advanced technology dazzled the world. Cities transformed with sustainable energy grids, disease eradicated with precision biotechnologies, and hunger addressed through genetically engineered crops. Nations hailed the Udraki as saviors, eager to integrate their systems into Earth's infrastructure. But for all the marvels they offered, there was something about the way the Udraki regarded humanity that nagged at Sarah Novak. The Udraki were kind, polite, but distant. There was a noticeable lack of emotional warmth, a clinical detachment in their interactions that made Sarah's skin crawl. To them, humanity was a species to be improved, refined, almost like raw material that needed shaping. They spoke of peace as though it were a scientific formula, a series of steps humanity could take to become more like them. But Sarah knew that the path to true peace wasn't always so clear-cut. Peace required understanding, compromise, and most importantly, trust, a quality the Udraki had yet to demonstrate. Dr. Ethan Hayes, ever the optimist, continued to engage with the Udraki in discussions about how humanity could evolve under their guidance. He had been the one to suggest the idea of the cultural exchange, and was now the leading advocate for their vision. He often spoke of humanity's potential, how Earth's societies could flourish under the Udraki's tutelage. But Sarah couldn't shake the sense that the Udraki saw humans not as partners, but as a project. It was during a high-profile event at a state-of-the-art facility, where the first test would take place, that Sarah realized just how much the Adraki had underestimated humanity. The Adraki had decided to show Earth's leaders and scientists just how much they had to offer, but they also wanted to measure human responses, how adaptable, how resilient, and how intelligent humans truly were. They would begin with a simulation. The challenge seemed harmless enough, a series of intellectual, physical, and strategic tests designed to assess humanity's potential. The Adraki had already decided the format, the rules, and the stakes. Humans would be tested in a simulated combat environment, using the latest in holographic technology, of course, where they would face off against Adraki-designed threats, both physical and mental. The human participants would have no advanced weaponry, no specialized equipment, only their wits and bodies. The Adraki were certain that the humans would falter in the face of these challenges, unable to cope with the sheer sophistication of their enemies and their technology. Sarah Novak was tasked with selecting the participants. Among them were top athletes, seasoned soldiers, and intelligence operatives, individuals who had spent their lives training for situations that required strategic thinking and quick reflexes. At first, Sarah felt a slight pang of doubt. Were the Adraki right? Could humanity, with all its achievements, still be as fragile as they believed? But then, a quiet determination began to settle in her chest. The Adraki had no idea what they were about to witness. She selected her team with care. Jack Reynolds, a former Navy SEAL with an uncanny ability to think on his feet. Lucy Alvarez, a champion in mixed martial arts, with a brutal fighting style and unmatched endurance. And Ben Carter, an expert in cyber warfare, who could hack into systems on the fly. These were not just the best humanity had to offer. They were survivors, warriors who had been forged by the harshest trials on Earth. As the day of the simulation approached, Sarah's unease grew. The Adraki were so confident, so sure of their superiority, that they didn't even see the danger in underestimating humanity's ingenuity, resourcefulness, and most importantly, its hunger to survive. She only hoped that her team would rise to the challenge when the time came. This section highlights the growing tension as the Adraki continue to test humanity, believing they are in complete control. Sarah's growing doubts and strategic selection of the team set the stage for the confrontation to come, while also reinforcing the idea that humanity's true strength lies in its ability to adapt and survive, traits the Adraki have not yet recognized. The narrative is building toward the pivotal moment where the simulation will turn into something much more than anyone expected. The simulation chamber was a vast, open arena that resembled a high-tech coliseum, its walls made of shimmering holographic materials that could instantly transform to simulate any environment. Deserts, forests, urban sprawls, even the depths of the ocean. The air was crisp, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. On the Adraki side, everything was precisely measured, controlled, and designed to showcase their technological superiority. They stood in their pristine uniforms, observing from an elevated platform, their eyes glowing with quiet confidence. They believed they were providing a controlled challenge, a harmless test of human limits. Sarah Novak stood beside her team, her eyes scanning the arena. Jack Reynolds, his jaw set in grim determination, gave her a quick nod. Lucy Alvarez stretched her limbs, her focus absolute, while Ben Carter was already muttering to himself, running through digital codes and contingency plans in his mind. They had no weapons, no gear beyond the simple clothes they'd been given. Tight-fitting uniforms designed for maximum movement, but utterly mundane in their simplicity. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice steady. "I've faced worse," Jack said with a grin. "They've got tech on their side, but we've got something they can't program." Lucy's lips curled into a smirk. "Let's show them what human means." Ben didn't respond. He was already plugging in a data pad to a small portable device that could interface with the simulation's control system, working to exploit any weaknesses in the virtual infrastructure. The Adraki ambassador, Nyrex, stepped forward, his voice soft but firm. This will be a demonstration of human adaptability. You will face challenges designed to test your intelligence, endurance, and, of course, your capacity for peace. We expect you to act with honor and control." Sarah bit back a sharp retort, but the word hung heavy in her mind. Honor. The Udraki might not understand what they were asking. Humanity didn't fight with honor alone. They'd fought to win. And right now, she was more concerned about survival than formality. The holograms flickered to life. A dense jungle materialized before them, its thick foliage and jagged terrain demanding immediate attention. In an instant, the sound of crackling trees and distant animal calls filled the air. This was no ordinary virtual environment. It felt real. The smell of damp earth, the heat pressing in from every angle, all simulated to perfection. The Udraki's objective was clear. The team of humans would need to navigate the environment, avoid obstacles, and survive. The first challenge came almost immediately. A pack of large virtual predators emerged from the jungle, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans, and in a flash, they charged. At first glance, the creatures looked like nothing more than a sophisticated holographic display, sleek, vicious, and swift. But there was no time to admire the realism. Lucy was the first to react, her instincts taking over as she lunged to tackle one of the predators, using her bare hands to bring it to the ground. It was a brutal, raw display of human strength and agility. "Don't engage unless we have to," Sarah barked, scanning the area. She could hear the Udraki above them, their voices hushed, probably recording every move. But she knew that this simulation was more than just a test. It was an assessment. They were being judged, every moment scrutinized. Jack moved next, his military training kicking in as he used the environment to his advantage, ducking behind a boulder and using its natural cover to avoid the creatures. Ben, who had been fiddling with his device, suddenly froze. He could feel it. The system was glitching. Something wasn't right. "They're tweaking the simulation," he muttered under his breath. "They're making it harder." The predators weren't supposed to come this fast. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she realized what was happening. The Udraki weren't just observing. They were interfering. The simulation wasn't as much of a test as it was a trap, and they were pushing humanity into a corner to see how it would react. "Stay sharp," she shouted, rallying her team. "This is no longer just a test. We're in a fight now." The predators closed in, their glowing eyes narrowing as they stalked the humans through the dense virtual jungle. Each step Sarah took was calculated, every sound she made deliberately hushed. The Udraki had designed the environment to be beautiful, but it was also treacherous. Wild animals, hostile terrain, and constant environmental shifts that kept the humans on edge. But in this chaos, Sarah saw opportunity. The Udraki might control the system, but they couldn't control human ingenuity. "Jack, Lucy, go left," Sarah ordered, her voice sharp and commanding. "Ben, keep hacking. We need a back door." The team split, moving quickly through the jungle. Jack Reynolds took the lead, his instincts as a Navy SEAL kicking in. The predators were fast, but Jack had spent years in environments like this. Urban warfare, dense forests, unpredictable conditions. He ducked behind a massive tree trunk, using his training to anticipate the creature's movements. The first predator lunged, but Jack was already behind it, using his body weight to twist the creature to the ground with a well-timed grapple. He didn't hesitate. His knee pressed into the virtual animal's back as he quickly disabled it, mimicking a chokehold maneuver. "One down," Jack muttered under his breath, but the others were closing in. He had no time to gloat. Meanwhile, Lucy Alvarez was just as focused. A seasoned martial artist, she didn't need weapons to take down her enemies. She had been in fights where every second counted, where every movement had to be precise. When another predator attacked, she sidestepped with almost supernatural grace, using the creature's momentum against it. A swift, brutal kick to its flank sent the creature tumbling into the bushes. "Keep moving," Sarah shouted, as she used the chaos of the battle to navigate deeper into the jungle. She knew the Dreki were watching, measuring their every move, evaluating their tactics. She couldn't afford to play by their rules. Ben Carter, meanwhile, was crouched near a cluster of boulders, fingers flying over his device. His expertise in cyber warfare allowed him to see things others couldn't. The Dreki had no idea just how vulnerable their tech was. As he worked, the environment around them began to shift. The predator's movements became erratic, the jungle itself warping into an unfamiliar terrain. "Got it," Ben said, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "I've triggered a loop in their systems. They're going to run a series of random environmental shifts, weather patterns, terrain changes, you name it. I'm messing with their coding." The Dreki might have designed a sophisticated system, but they didn't understand human unpredictability. They thought their simulation was foolproof, but they hadn't accounted for the ways humanity adapted when pushed to its limits. This wasn't just a physical test. It was a mental game, a battle of wills, and Ben had just thrown a wrench into their machine. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The air grew thick and heavy as the jungle morphed into a dark, storm-ravaged landscape. Fierce winds howled through the trees, sending the team scrambling for cover. But they didn't panic. Jack ducked under the cover of a fallen tree. Lucy vaulted over an outcropping of rock, and Sarah quickly assessed the shifting environment. They had faced worse in real life. Extreme conditions, unpredictable combat zones, and now, in the face of a glitching, increasingly hostile simulation, they would turn the Dreki's own game against them. "They want to test us," Sarah muttered, a grim smile crossing her face. "Let's show them how humans survive." The storm raged on, but it no longer mattered. Humanity wasn't just surviving in the simulation. It was fighting back, using the very unpredictability that had once been a weakness as a weapon. And as the Dreki watched from above, their smiles began to fade. Humanity was no longer just a subject to study. They were a force to be reckoned with. The human team begins to turn the tables on the Dreki by using their skills and resourcefulness to disrupt the simulation. The guerrilla tactics, honed from years of real-world experience, are on full display. The Dreki, who had expected a controlled and predictable scenario, are starting to see the full extent of humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and tenacity. The shift in power begins here, and it sets the stage for the real conflict to unfold. The virtual jungle had become a battleground. As the storm raged and the terrain shifted erratically, the Dreki's once confident demeanor started to crack. From their elevated observation platform, they watched as the human team adapted to every challenge, exploiting every flaw in the simulation. The creatures they had engineered to be the apex predators of this environment were being outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and disabled. The humans had become more than just participants in the test. They were turning the simulation into a fight for survival. Sarah Novak, eyes scanning the shifting horizon, knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Dreki were in control of the simulation's parameters, and if they wanted to end this, they could. Yet for the moment, they seemed unwilling to intervene directly, perhaps because they wanted to see how far the humans would go. The longer they kept up this resistance, the more the Dreki would learn about humanity's true potential. "We've broken the system," Ben said over comms, his voice crackling with excitement. "The terrain is glitching every few minutes. The creatures are acting erratically. I've made it loop so they can't stabilize it." "Good," Sarah replied. "But we need to stay ahead. They'll figure it out soon." She glanced at Jack and Lucy, both of whom were now more than a step ahead of the Dreki's plan. They had gone from being the ones tested to the ones doing the testing. Jack had just neutralized a particularly vicious creature with a quick hand-to-hand maneuver, while Lucy had found a way to use the environment against the predators, luring them into traps of her own design. But as Sarah took another step forward, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath them trembled violently, and the sky above darkened further, now resembling a storm of a different kind. Thick, swirling clouds of deep violet that seemed to pulse with energy. In an instant, the Ydraki's peaceful simulation turned hostile. The creatures stopped their erratic attacks and retreated into the shadows. The jungle itself seemed to grow unnaturally still, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt an unsettling calm. "This isn't right," Ben said, his voice strained. "They're adjusting things. Whatever they're doing, it's bad." It was then that the Ydraki made their first true move. Nyrex's voice echoed in their comms, a low, metallic tone. "You have proven yourselves resourceful, but this is not a game. You will now face the true test." With those words, the ground beneath their feet cracked open. A massive fissure split the earth, sending shockwaves through the simulation as towering crystalline structures began to rise from the ground. The very environment had transformed into something alien, unnatural even by the Ydraki standards. The once stable simulation had now become a chaotic nightmare, a strange world where gravity was erratic and time seemed to warp. "This is a trap," Sarah hissed, taking in the shifting landscape. The Ydraki weren't testing their survival anymore. They were testing their breaking point. Before they could react, the ground around them gave way, and the predators reappeared. But this time they were not just holograms. They were more advanced, faster, and deadlier. The predators had evolved into something else, fully autonomous beings that seemed to be learning from the humans' actions. "We've got to fight through it," Jack said, already drawing a weapon that wasn't there moments ago, an energy rifle materializing out of thin air, likely another Ydraki design. He aimed it at the nearest predator, firing with precision. "Stay focused," Sarah snapped, grabbing a nearby rock and hurling it at one of the towering crystalline structures to destabilize it. She saw the Ydraki on their platform watching with growing tension, their faces unreadable. The test had turned into something more. The human team was no longer just surviving. They were now fighting for their very lives in an environment that was rapidly shifting from challenging to hostile. But as the battle intensified, something crucial shifted within Sarah. The Ydraki had underestimated the human will to survive. And now, it was no longer just about passing their test. It was about showing them the one thing the Ydraki had not predicted, that humans would never be controlled, never be contained, and never stop fighting for their freedom. "They want to break us," Sarah muttered, her eyes steely with resolve. "Let's make sure they regret it." The ground trembled beneath Sarah's feet as the crystalline structures around them continued to rise, glowing with unnatural light. The jungle that had once seemed like an adversary now felt almost tranquil compared to the shifting nightmare the Ydraki had unleashed. The predators, no longer just part of a simulation, but fully autonomous and more dangerous than ever, circled them like sharks in open water, their glowing eyes tracking their every movement. "We're not going to last long like this," Jack muttered, his energy rifle crackling as he fired into the mass of creatures surrounding them. The shots didn't seem to do much. The creatures were adapting, dodging, learning. These things are evolving with every move we make. The environment itself seemed to be shifting, as if the very ground beneath them was alive. The towering crystal structures pulsated with an eerie rhythm, sending waves of distortion through the air. The sky, once darkened by storm clouds, had now taken on an unnatural hue. Violet, green, and orange clouds swirled in an impossible dance, as if to mock the laws of nature. "We need to move. If we stay in one place, we'll be sitting ducks," Lucy said, her voice steady despite the chaos. She had always thrived in unpredictable situations, and the constant change in their surroundings was no different. She grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her into motion. But Sarah's focus was on something else. "Ben, what's going on with the simulation?" Ben's fingers flew over his device as he tried to regain control, but the interface was glitching, flickering between distorted screens and corrupted data. I can't stop it. The Ydraki have completely locked me out of the system. It's no longer just a simulation. It's become real." Sarah's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. The Udraki had pushed them into a trap, a scenario where escape was impossible unless they somehow broke free of the simulation's control. Their actions, every calculated move, were being anticipated, countered, and manipulated. That's not all, Ben continued. It's like the simulation's learning from us. I've never seen anything like this before. It's adaptive. It's getting smarter. This is no longer a test, Sarah said, her voice hard. The Udraki are trying to break us. We're not just subjects in their game anymore. We're the enemy. Suddenly, one of the predators lunged, its sharp claws slashing through the air as it closed in on Ben. He was too distracted with his device, his focus shattered by the malfunctioning system. Without thinking, Jack reacted. He threw himself into the creature's path, tackling it to the ground. The predator hissed, its fangs bared, but Jack held on, using his strength to pin it down. He reached for the creature's neck, finding a weak spot and snapping it with a brutal twist. Ben, Lucy shouted, grabbing the device from his hands. Get it together. We need you now. Ben blinked, disoriented, but nodded. I'll try again. As Jack and Lucy provided cover, Sarah surveyed the situation. The predators were getting smarter, faster. The Udraki had engineered them to be lethal, but they hadn't accounted for one thing: human tenacity. Every time the team was pushed to the edge, they adapted. They turned their enemies' strengths into weaknesses. And now, the Udraki's carefully controlled environment was starting to break down. We need to break their hold on this simulation, Sarah said, her mind racing. She was starting to think beyond the immediate battle, understanding that the fight was no longer just physical. The Udraki had tried to force them into submission by changing the rules of the game, but what they didn't realize was that humans could adapt to even the most extreme circumstances. Ben, if you can get the system to crash, I'll take care of the rest, Sarah ordered. I'm on it, he said, his voice more focused now. Lucy moved to help Jack with the next wave of predators, while Sarah began to plan their next move. The Udraki thought they had humanity cornered, thought they could push them beyond their limits, but Sarah knew better. The human spirit wasn't something that could be controlled, no matter how advanced the technology was. They would find a way out, even if they had to tear the simulation apart piece by piece. The storm above them intensified, and for a moment, Sarah felt a cold rush of fear. But then, the fire of defiance ignited within her. We're not going to be their experiment, she muttered, looking up at the flickering sky. We're going to make them regret underestimating us. The simulation has gone from a mere test to a life-or-death situation, with the Udraki's true intentions becoming clear. Sarah and her team have realized that they are no longer subjects in a controlled environment. They're fighting for survival against an adaptive, hostile force. The battle is no longer just about physical combat, but also about breaking free from the Udraki's control, setting up the final confrontation where humanity's resilience and resourcefulness will be put to the ultimate test. The storm overhead had reached a crescendo, the swirling clouds now crackling with unnatural energy. The crystal structures around them pulsed violently, casting jagged shadows across the battlefield. The predators, faster, smarter, and more relentless than ever, closed in from all sides, but Sarah Novak could feel something shifting. This wasn't just another wave of attackers. This was their final test. The Udraki were pushing them to the edge, hoping for one last sign of weakness. But Sarah had seen it before. When humans were backed into a corner, that's when they were most dangerous. Ben, now, she shouted, as the next wave of predators charged. I'm working on it. Ben yelled back, his fingers flying over his device. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The strain of trying to break into the Udraki's advanced systems almost too much to bear. But the glitching, the stuttering in the simulation, it wasn't just a crack anymore. It was a fracture. You have seconds, Ben. Lucy's voice rang out as she pivoted into a brutal spinning kick, knocking one of the predators off balance. Jack was beside her, neutralizing another with precise, brutal efficiency. Every move was instinctive, every action a reflex honed by years of real-world conflict. But they were running out of time. The Udraki were observing closely now, silent but intense, watching with increasing interest as the humans seemed to rise against every obstacle. But there was no breaking through the crystal wall of the simulation. Not until Ben found a way to hack it completely. "Just a little longer," Ben grunted. He wiped his forehead, the effort clearly taxing his body and mind. The flickering screens on his device seemed to dance in and out of coherence. But then it happened. The system shuddered, as if a force beyond its own control had infiltrated its defenses. I've got it," Ben breathed, barely able to believe it. Suddenly, the holographic environment began to flicker, like a faulty film reel. The vivid colors of the jungle began to wash out. The crystal towers flickered in and out of existence, and the storm above them lost its intensity. The predators hesitated, confused by the instability. The entire simulation was coming apart at the seams. Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. "We've got one shot. We break it now, or we're done." She sprinted toward the center of the holographic battlefield, her team right behind her. The predators, distracted by the glitches, moved erratically, no longer attacking with the precision they once had. The Udraki had underestimated the human ability to adapt, to fight when cornered. And now, they were paying the price. "Ben, disable the core systems," Sarah barked. Ben's hands flew over his device, his mind calculating. He'd breached their systems, but there was one last part of the simulation's core that was still operational. It was a high-risk maneuver, but it was their only chance. He didn't hesitate. The moment he hit the final sequence, the entire simulation buckled. There was a deafening roar, and then absolute silence. The jungle vanished. The crystal structures disintegrated into nothingness. The storm cleared, and the eerie, shifting atmosphere evaporated. For a moment, everything was still. And then, the true world came back into focus. The cold, sterile walls of the Udraki observation chamber surrounded them, and the sounds of their own breathing returned. The Udraki, stunned into silence, stood motionless above them, their expressions unreadable. Sarah could feel the tension crackle in the air. They had won. The simulation had collapsed under the weight of human ingenuity and defiance. But now it was time for the Udraki to face the consequences of their arrogance. Sarah turned to face Nyrex, the Udraki ambassador who had overseen the entire test. His face was calm, but there was a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "You," he began, his voice failing for a moment. "How did you? You underestimated us," Sarah said coldly, her eyes never leaving his. "And now we've proven that humans will never be anyone's experiment. We adapt, we fight, and we win." Nyrex stood motionless, a strange look crossing his face. Then, to Sarah's surprise, his lips curled into the faintest smile, not one of mockery, but of respect. "Perhaps we have much to learn from you after all." Sarah stood tall, her gaze unwavering. The simulation was over. The Udraki had witnessed humanity's true strength, and it was something they had never anticipated. The game was no longer in their hands. "Let's see if you're ready to learn," Sarah said. "But remember this, humans don't take kindly to being underestimated." With that, she turned her back on the Udraki, signaling her team to move forward. The battle was won, but the real war, humanity's place in the universe, was just beginning. Where humanity, led by Sarah and her team, breaks free from the Udraki's control and demonstrates the true strength of the human spirit. The Udraki, who once believed they could control and manipulate humanity, are forced to acknowledge their error. But Sarah's final words indicate that while this battle is won, humanity's struggle for respect and equality in the galaxy is just beginning. The story ends on a note of triumph, but also with the promise of future challenges.